Have you ever wondered where we got our technology that we use today? History tends to erase and repaint events such as this brilliant innovator. This man was the inventor of the computer, and he created the image of artificial intelligence. He achieved many things in his lifetime, even if he was different for his society's expectations. This man was a homosexual. This was a struggle because of the existing anti-homosexual laws in Great Britain. But this did not stop him from becoming a success in mathematics and technology. Although Alan Matheson Turing was different from others, he was one of the most successful men in the 20th century. He was a veteran in disguise, a mind behind the screen. His intelligence has snuck its way into our modern lives, and we should never forget how. Turing was born June 23, 1912 in Maida Vale, London. His parents were Ethel Sarah and Julius Matheson Turing. As a child, he was very different. He was more curious than others and was strangely interested in being a scientific specialist. He furthered his love with computer science while reading about Einstein. He liked to run, which was not well known, and as a child, he went to a preparatory school, and at age 13, he transferred to Sherborne School, a boarding independent school in Sherborne, Dorset. He went to college as an undergraduate at King's College, Cambridge. Turing graduated with distinction in mathematics in 1934. A year later, he was elected a Fellow of King's on the strength of a dissertation in which he proved the central limit theorem. In 1938, he went to Princeton University in the U.S. and received a Ph.D. in mathematics. But in September of 1939, he was asked to attend the government Golden Cyber School shortly before the Second World War. One of his first big accomplishments was the invention of the Universal Turing Machine. This machine was invented in 1936 and was introduced by Alonzo Church. The machine had two purposes. It can be used to decide a formal language and solves mathematical functions. Turing's goal was to create a machine that can learn from experience. Now, Turing machines are one of the most important formal models in the study of computer science. Of course, our computers are a lot smaller than this machine, which was actually the first computer in history. Turing had invented the computer in 1936. This made a huge impact in Turing's life because it brought his mathematical interest to life. And we use the same principles he used in the Turing machine in translators and calculators today. In 1939, during World War II, the Germans would send strategic messages from U-boats to a machine called the Enigma, which would turn the messages into code by changing its letters. For example, if the letter A was written, the Enigma would not encrypt it as an A. Turing and his crew from Cambridge, including Joanne Clark, Hugh Alexander, Stuart Menzies, and John Carracross, worked from 1939 to 1941 in order to decrypt the codes, which made World War II 2 years shorter. They did this by inventing a machine known as a bomb. The bomb used practically the same principles as the Enigma, but of course worked in reverse. The bomb would translate the ciphers into its original form. This machine was originally invented in 1939 but was revised in 1940. The machine had 36 Enigma equivalents. They were rotating drums that stimulated an Enigma rotor. The first bomb was named Victory, but the revised one was named Angus Day or Agnes. Shortly after the war, around 1950, Turing wanted to discover the differences between human and artificial intelligence, so he invented the Turing test, which could test a machine's ability to show intelligent behavior similar to a person. This test worked in an organized fashion. An interrogator would try to determine which is a computer and which is a human by giving questions to written responses. For example, the interrogator will ask a question, and a human as well as a computer will respond. The test was originally introduced in Turing's paper, Computing and Machinery and Intelligence, which reads, I propose to consider the question, can machines think? A computer program called Eugene Gutzman, which simulates a 13-year-old Ukrainian boy, is said to have passed the Turing test at an event organized by the University of Reading in 2014. Other than that, no machine has passed the test. One widely known fact about Turing was that he was homosexual. So in 1952, he was sent to court for homosexual acts with Arnold Murray. This event occurred 3 different times. The trials were held on March 31, 1952, which resulted in Turing losing. This resulted in him being placed on probation for 1 year and get treated by a medical practitioner in Manchester. Turing's conviction meant that he lost his security clearance and had to stop working at the government communications headquarters, the post-war successor to Bletchley Park. His trial papers went on display for a month in 2016, which labeled his gross indecency. We all know good things must end, but not intentionally. On June 8, 1954, Turing was found dead by his housekeeper at age 41. The scene description was morbid. There was a half-eaten apple beside his bed and something bubbling over the stove. He had died the day before with the bitter smell of almonds in the air. They concluded that he died by cyanide poisoning. Imagine what more he could have accomplished if he hadn't decided to end his life. The detectives believe he intentionally created the poisoned apple from Snow White in 1945. And if you look at the Apple logo today, it is a partially eaten apple. It is believed to be inspired off of Alan Turing's suicide. But today, some people believe his death was an accident, because they never tested the apple, but we all know he died by cyanide poisoning. There is still some speculation today. There were a few conflicts in Turing's life. They caused him to struggle in his work, and he couldn't carry on with his life until they were gone. Some examples include losing his friend Christopher Markham in 1930, who shared his similar interests. Another example was his frustrating work in World War II. The team conflicted a lot, but in the end, the initial task was complete. He also expressed conflict mentally in his court trials in 1952 and his suicide. Another challenge for him was his homosexuality, since it wasn't encouraged or acknowledged. The United Kingdom legalized homosexuality 13 years after Turing's death through the Sexual Offences Act in 1967. And in 2013, Turing was forgiven for his homosexual acts, but he was already long gone. They were challenging for Turing to overcome, but eventually they vanished. Although Turing was pretty conflicted, there were some compromises, such as overcoming Markham's death. His death was by bovine tuberculosis and was completely unexpected. Markham's death made a huge grieving period for Turing. Another example would be building the bomb, which was one huge compromise in the war. The British didn't believe that the codes were a major part of the war until they began corresponding attacks, which caused mass devastation in the UK, in creating revolutionary turn points in technology by building the modern principles we use in computers today, such as calculators and language translators. But now machines have also become smarter and more capable of doing remarkable things. He also had to face his punishments from court. 1 year of probation took away his clearance at GCHQ, but was able to face it. These were what drove Turing to his success, which can only happen by staying persistent. His persistence was shown in his capability of trying to keep going no matter how bad he failed. This was the biggest building block to Turing's history, which made him who he was. And that's how we can never forget him today. Today we still use technology, but no one really knows the mind behind it. Over the years, our computers and phones have drastically improved in size, shape, capability, and durability. New capabilities include the ability to create forms of art such as drawings and music, and you can now communicate with your friends and family. Not even Turing could have thought that his work would lead to these improvements. But he isn't as familiar of a historical figure as people like George Washington or Martin Luther King Jr. Even still, he is one of the most successful and innovative men of the 20th century. Although our technology is different from Turing's, the principles are somewhat the same, and history shouldn't be forgetful to his name.